Welcome to Real People, No Mask Required. You'll learn about real people facing real life experiences with your host, Liz Younger, licensed clinical social worker.
Hello, my name is Liz Younger, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been in the field since 1988. I want to welcome you to Real People, No Mask Required. This is a video series about talking to real people and their authentic experiences. And today it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Steve Brosky, a local celebrity, musician, and songwriter. So, Steve, I guess I want to say hello and thank you very much for coming on to the show. Again, a part of this authentic experience is also sharing a little bit about like your mental health, your feelings as you're going through this current pandemic and the events that have happened during the pandemic. And to begin with, Steve, you're a working musician. You are somebody, pardon me, that earns their living when you have opportunities to play music. So when this pandemic first started and the quarantine began, what were your initial feelings?
Well, hello, Liz, and thanks for having me. Right at the beginning of this thing, it was the beginning of March. I actually was able to get about 3 gigs in from March 1st. It was actually Susan Wild's, her kickoff campaign party that I played. And then I did a couple other gigs up till like March 10th or 11th. And that weekend is when people began to cancel, their events and bars and restaurants, etc. And I obviously was booked through this whole period of when we would be through the COVID-19 thing. And at first I, obviously was concerned and anxious and there was some anxiety about exactly that everybody shared that what's going to happen. And I was a little financially, I'm not really hanging on to every last cent kind of thing. I'm not depending on every cent that I get in to live every day. So I was in a position, like most people were, to kind of hang on for a while. And it was concerning to me that the effect it would basically have on the community at large. And there was mixed reactions, as we all know, and where people didn't agree with the idea of shutting down till it was quote unquote safe. So I guess, to put it in a sentence, anxious, unclear, and crossing my fingers basically for the best, and being very careful about wearing the mask and gloves and all the contamination factor of this whole thing.
Music, obviously, you were able to use to get feedback from the audience as well, which of course sustains you on many levels, as well as being able to use it as a way to emote, right? As a way to express yourself. So during the pandemic, how were you able to maybe use that to help you stay focused and calm, right?
Well, I immediately wanted to and began to write a song called The Mess We're In.
Oh.
Or how do we get into this mess we're in? And then I felt a little guilty about trying, like as if I was piling on kind of thing. So, and the other thing that was happening was there was a number of people doing on Facebook live events, where they would play the music and have their Facebook community tune in kind of thing. And I thought about doing that, but then like just about everybody and his brother was doing that. And I thought, well, I should have acted earlier on that, should have got out in front of that. So that didn't really happen for me. And I thought about being creative about it and writing about it. And then sure enough, the whole George Floyd thing happened. Well, there I became creative and I did write about it and was able to throw something together and entitled I Can't Breathe, which is exactly, but this is not a maybe title to the COVID. This all happened in that period of time. So that's the only relation I could connect it to. But I wanted to write and began to write The Mess We're In. But I
Okay.
didn't finish it.
I think it's interesting that you drew the parallel that you did, because of course the information that we have talks about COVID being related to pulmonary issues, as well as, what happens when people are feeling so stressed. Sometimes it does feel that way. And then unfortunately for George Floyd, and the message it sent to all of us about racism in our country, particularly in a situation like the pandemic and the quarantine, it just seemed like the perfect storm. I guess, what feedback have you gotten back about your song?
I've gotten 100%, support, 100%. That there has been no criticism. I mean, how can you criticize that? I mean, and, for people who are less healthier than I am, and I'm not all that healthy, and I've had my own issues, and I've been through a lot of different things, and I can imagine the stress level of being not able to go to work, being at home, and these are the recommendations, and this is what the community is doing, basically. I could imagine the compound issue that would be if for people who are less mentally healthier, and my heart goes out to them. I really feel bad about that. And we live in a country where people do not pay attention to the mental health in general of this country. The psyche of this country is very damaged, and nobody has made back in the 70s, there was sort of the hippie thing and all of that, and technology at that point wasn't as obvious as it is today, and powerful in all walks of life, including finance and everything like that. So we had a little bit more of a laid back, hippie, peaceful period of time, and mental health issues were dealt with. The psyche of the country was better. But once the snowball happened of the way we wound our culture today, that took us to this point, the psyche of this country has been in terrible shape. Mental health in this country has been abused, and I'm lucky enough that I'm old enough to have gone through it as an early period of time in my life, coming back from Vietnam and drugs and alcohol and all that stuff. So I was able to move on with my life and become, a creative person in the community. But I feel bad for the people who are dealing with this, because I can only imagine.
So, as you stated, you dealt with your issues coming back from Vietnam in the 70s. And what were some of the strategies that you still use today, particularly as we have come into this COVID without answers and not feeling like we're in control and feeling really isolated? Were you able to draw on some of those experiences?
I think, yeah, I go through life learning that I've learned a lot of stuff about myself, and that how I am capable. I'm capable of staying sober. I'm not drinking or drugging. I'm capable of creating a different lifestyle for myself. And my theory was replacement. My bad habits were replaced with music and, that kind of thing to a degree. So there's things that I obviously learned through going to rehab and going to, going through that whole process and winding up in a halfway house, and very valuable things I learned about myself, because when that all happened to me, I was young enough to not even know me as a person,
Mm-hmm.
and it was I became an adult through that, a worthy, productive adult.
You had talked to me earlier this week about you've had your wife to kind of give you support through this period of time. And you also talked about your daughter and her visits. So I guess I just wanted you to expand a little bit about that and the contacts you've been able to have.
Well, it's been limited, but we've worn our masks. You know, we've the protocol of this, and my daughter is a artiste. You know, a painter, visual artist is the word. And if anything, I taught her well to live, on a artist income kind of thing, and not running up the credit card bill and all of that. But yeah, she's healthy, and it was, it was important. It's very important to have these family connections, and she's a woman, she grew up, and so, it's important to have your family connections, and it's a great value to that.
So I guess with regards to the other members in your family, did you feel that they may have needed additional support in any way? Or do you just, well, I guess I'm going to stop at that question, right? Did you feel like any other family members maybe needed more support during this?
I didn't give it any thought. I mean, I really didn't feel that way. I mean, nobody said anything to me that they were hurting in any kind of situation, or being needy in any situation. And of course, if somebody responded, I would have tried my best.
Okay. It's just, sometimes there's like the person in the family that is pretty stable and is able to reframe things, right? And it sounded to me like you were a person who could reframe the situation to, keep it from causing you to have any sort of negative feelings or negative experiences.
Yeah, I try, first of all, to be positive. Mm-hmm. The energy that you have to put into being, making it more difficult for anybody, including yourself, there's a lot less energy that goes into being positive.
Yes, absolutely. And I really love the way that you channeled your experiences into creative outcomes, by being able to almost journal it through song.
I've always had an interest in writing that way. And the night John Lennon died in 1980, December 8th, 1980, I wrote the Ballad of John Lennon, and recorded it quickly that week. And actually, WZZO at the time wound up playing it on that next weekend on the air. And so that really was kind of my first reaction to writing about a certain issue. And then when Billy Joel sang about Allentown, kind of putting Allentown, which actually he was 100% right, but I countered with a somewhat of a novelty song using the Pennsylvania Dutch accent that really we grew up with around here. We know what that was, and I mimicked that in a song answering Billy Joel's song. And eventually and I write a lot of different kinds of material, bluesy orientated and garage rock kind of thing. But also I finally wrote something called the Vietnam Blues, which was about not being in Vietnam, but coming back from Vietnam, where the country really treated the veterans not good. And I have another description, but I don't have to use it. Anyway, we didn't get treated well. And the Vietnam Blues is really about coming back from Vietnam.
Right, and being able to put those emotions, those feelings into a song. I mean, that's a really great strategy to help you process what's going on. And
yeah, I agree. There's a lot of facing it, trying to understand it, and then trying to relieve yourself of it in a weird way, and being, constructive, really making something a constructive situation, and that's producing a song.
So, right. So the idea of being able to educate people through song about issues And like what kind of a feeling does that leave you with?
Well, I believe that that is a great way to teach people. I think people have one thing in common in life, and that's music, whether they know it or not. And the um, the idea that I'm trying to think of something like Bob Dylan, was very brought a lot of the, this is going back to the civil rights stuff,
Mhm.
Brought a lot of that to the open, or to people who had ears to what he was saying. I really think that he really, and that's Bob Dylan style, which was a school that that I wish I could say I was like to be a part of, but uh, and just flipping this over to the "I Can't Breathe" song. The responses I've been getting obviously been positive, but people have been leaving messages like beautiful.
Yeah.
I haven't
So,
talked so much lately.
well, yeah, I'm sure that you've
I'm
been
joking.
spending more time in your mind as you're creating these hopefully timeless songs, even though they represent a certain event or episode in time. Ultimately, they will be timeless because they'll talk about a piece of history.
I agree, and I think it's important that actually, do you know who Chance Austin is? Well, he picked up this song, and I guess he's sending it to whomever that that they play it. He's a radio disc jockey. But anyway, yeah, it would be nice if people could learn from pop culture, because pop culture is the teacher in this country. If you look at the way especially young people act or dress, or they're learning it from pop. They ain't learning it. They're not learning it in school. Let me say it that way.
Well, theoretically. So I guess now that we're coming out of the quarantine and coming out of the pandemic, like how are you feeling about that? Are you feeling, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I tend to just ask how you are feeling and what words you would like to use.
Well, I feel good about it. I feel that the hot weather now could be a plus as far as I don't know how well a virus or flu could live in hot weather. Virus and flu, in my opinion, has always been, the winter months, and that's the flu and cold season.
Okay.
But anyway, I hope that is the case, and then I would be optimistic, and I think it could be a good thing, and prepare ourselves, because that's one thing we were not prepared, or nobody showed us really how to be prepared months before this happened, when perhaps somebody could have predicted this happened, other than me or you or somebody else. Somebody in position could have predicted and proactive instead of not being proactive.
So there's been a lot of questions about the quarantine and how long it should last and should it have happened. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it should have happened, and I think we should be in a position where the curve, or things are really flattening out, where people get sick and die every day. Those numbers are accountable, and the alarming thing was that these numbers went up. The average typical deaths and sickness went up since March, April. That's when the peak of this problem was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once these numbers really flatten themselves out, better than, and it appears that that's what's happening.
So I know last week when I had originally contacted you, you were feeling it was still a little soon for things to open up, but I get the sense that you've changed that thinking.
Well, I want to be conservative about it. I do have a performance scheduled for Friday night in Allentown at the Shanty on 19th, and it's an outside gig. It's going to be on the sidewalk, and I feel that I'm not going to be making out with any, I'm not going to be kissing and hugging people and swapping, spit or anything like that. So I, I'm going to play the music and get
Are you
paid and go
still
home.
are you still practicing social distancing? Have you been observing any, I don't know, changes in some of the social distancing?
It varies, as you probably notice. It varies no matter where you're going. Going to the supermarket 4 or 5 weeks ago, there really was tape on the floor. You got to stand. And people really regulating the distance. Lines that would start at the back of the store, a single file line would come around the store, and so that was done in a regulated fashion. I didn't see that the last 2 days or the last few days I went to the supermarket. I didn't see that regulated effort as far as social distancing. But
Did
people
that
still had masks.
did
I'm
that make
sorry.
you more comfortable, or did it leave you kind of at questioning?
I really didn't give it much thought. I don't like to spend a whole lot of time shopping to begin with, and so what I had to get is quick enough and getting the express line kind of thing. I wasn't in the store a very long time, so I didn't feel concerned. I wasn't going, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't look right.
So if I were to summarize, it sounds to me that, you stayed active in your decision to journal your experiences through music. You felt like you had a lot of family support that was helpful in buffering some of the isolation that many people have had. And the idea that you had this really good base about when you were doing something that maybe was unhealthy, you knew to replace it with something that was healthy.
Yes, I would say you're right.
And if you had any final thoughts that you wanted to share, I guess I'm just going to let you share it. And if you don't, well, okay.
Well, my final thoughts is, just referring to getting back to go shopping, what today looks like, what June 10th, 2020 looks like. I would feel hopeful. I'm feeling hopeful that we definitely got through this safely in general, and that for the time being, it could be behind us. That's what I'm hopeful about. And for everybody to stay safe and don't do anything crazy.
Okay. Don't do anything crazy. And if you
Well,
do,
like there was a
make sure you have
tattoo.
your supports, right?
Yeah, there was a tattoo joint. It was back in April or something, or May, and they wanted to open up. There's a place where you're swapping blood and that kind of thing, a tattoo place, and he opened up regardless, and I don't know exactly what happened to him, but I call that crazy.
Okay. There's one other question. I apologize. I meant to ask it sooner.
That's
But
okay.
so we were in the middle of this pandemic and the events that occurred, specifically George Floyd's death and the protests that went on. And how do you think, for yourself, for your family, that situation, like, how intense did it make your feelings and your experience related to the pandemic, to the riots, right?
Well, a little concerning. I mean, there was a lot of thousands of people out and about, and a portion of them did wear a mask and seemed to be protecting themselves. And we're just going to have to wait and see. I again would like to be optimistic and think that all of that is a minimal situation.
Did you feel like the quarantine at all intensified people's responses?
Well, I believe I just think that the fact that black men have been mowed down by the police for a very long time, and the police who have fortified themselves through unions and through legislation have always been protected. when it comes to taking somebody's life, and usually a black man's life, an unarmed black man. Now, there was we have the ability to see John Oliver on HBO, and he did a piece about this one particular guy who travels the country and teaches law officers basically shoot first, ask questions later, and said to the audience of police people, if you don't have the guts to kill somebody on the job, get up and leave right now. And nobody got up. And I thought to myself, this is the kind of training these people are getting. It's amazing. I mean, the people are out in the street for a whole lot of reasons. Part of the reason is the reform that is needed in the police departments across this country, in the Justice Department all across this country. You know, the Catholic Church had priests that were pedophiles, and there was stuff done about that. There was an effort to clean that up. The Boy Scouts were put out of business because of pedophile situations. They went bankrupt. So it can happen to the police department. A real solid effort could be put in reforming the justice system and the police department across this country. And again, I can refer to, because I'm old enough to refer to the 1970s when there was a better period of time the way we treated each other. I got arrested for having some, like a small amount of marijuana in Easton, PA in 1970 something. So I went to the court. The guy gave me 12 postcards and he said, send one in every month. And that was, you know, that was the extent of what they were going to do to me. You know, so it was 1 year probation. And at that time, they were trying to decriminalize marijuana back in the 70s. But, you know, the alcohol business, you know, Budweiser said, what are you, crazy? Anyway, I'm sorry.
How do you feel about like the idea there's been put forth down in Philadelphia in particular about social services, mental health, collaborating with law enforcement, and the idea that that would decrease what we're seeing with regards to some of the behaviors, criminality, the aggression and violence?
Oh, I think that's a good effort. And I really think that's, you know, if that can be helpful, that's obviously a good thing. But I'd still think that there's still a corner of that. There's a percentage of that no matter what you try to do, the justice system will still be unfair to a certain part of the population. And you know, that needs, I mean, I really think that the justice system needs to literally change and make it less biased. Basically, if you're a person with less means, you're likely to get swept up in the system. And you know, there's part of the system is where you do this bail thing. You know about the bail thing, where you get on the turnstile where it's like, if you don't have enough for the bail, well, they'll loan you the rest of it at a certain percentage. You know, it's like dealing with a shark, and you know, a shark loan. And you know, at a certain point where if you aren't totally caught up, that's it, you go to jail. You know, so there's a terrible system about the bail in certain places. This isn't a federal law. This is like somewhere down, you know, Texas or Georgia or some place like that.
So Steve, I really love that you shared at this level, you know, your feelings about what is going on in a larger context, as well as your experience during this quarantine, the pandemic. And I hear you saying that you feel like now is the time to kind of go out again in a cautious and judicious way, to start resuming some activities. And hopefully for you, it's about going back to doing what you do best, entertaining people and getting that vibe and that energy. I want to thank you very, very much for being on Real People, No Mask Required. And I will definitely be out to see you. Good luck to you. And yeah, I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you for listening to Real People, No Mask Required. Real stories, real life events, real people. For more information, visit lizyounger.com. That's lizyounger.com.